Well, welcome to the True Man Podcast. Let's have a discussion on weight today. I know this is a heavy topic. Ha, 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 ha. Listen, all kidding aside, a lot of people struggle with weight, and today's guest is no different. On today's program, I'm speaking with Daniel Reyes. He is the creator of, I think, a pretty cool item of fasting dice. Very interesting fasting program that he has created, and it's helped him drop over 160 pounds so far. Daniel, welcome to the True Man Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Wow. I mean, Daniel, listen, you have an incredible story. Let's just start with this. At your heaviest weight, what did you weigh in at?
So when I was at my heaviest, it's hard to say the exact number, because when I was at the tippy top, I was also being confined to a bed in an end of life room, and I had internal bleeding, so it was so bad they couldn't even put me on the scale anymore, and they found that the bed scale was inaccurate. So the last number I know is 460, but 460. It was probably higher.
Four. That's okay. Yeah. 460. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. There's probably a lot of directions I could go here. Well, and how tall are you?
I'm 5'4", so it's a little bowling ball.
Okay. So on the height and weight scale, I'm of course obese. So I'm going to get that out there because it's part of my deal to make sure I embarrass myself every podcast any way that I can. But that is
about most adults are.
Yeah, that's just the height and weight chart. So, but what did that feel like to weigh 460 pounds?
I mean, it was pretty bad. It was really, really bad. A lot of it was, it had come on fast towards, like at one point I gained almost 100 pounds in like a month and a half. And that was because of all the issues I had.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a lot of retaining of fluids, but also fat. So it was a lot.
So your body's basically breaking down to some degree because of the weight. Fair to say?
Right.
Yeah.
Fair to say. I had been born with a heart condition as well. So it's not like I had a good hand to start with. Obesity does tend to run higher in cardiac patients, is what I'm told.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also another card against me.
Yeah.
But it's been rough, man. It's been rough.
So you brought this up, so we're going to go there. So you're at a certain point, your body's breaking down and you have to go to the hospital. Or how does the trip to the hospital go? Because you're probably at home. How do they even get you out of the house? And I'm not trying to be funny here.
Yeah.
Serious. The reason I bring, this stuff up is I want people to know the gravity of the situation. So if they find themselves in this, then maybe they can make a decision, one way or another to change their habits or
the warning signs.
Yeah.
Thank God I could still walk.
Okay.
Up until that point. I would be out of breath pretty quickly, but I could walk. And so at that point, for about a month, I had not been able to sleep laying down. I had to sleep sitting up. My voice started to go, and people were noticing my lips were turning blue.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I just was like, oh, I'm fine. I just have a bad cold. It's okay.
Right.
And people were like, no, something's wrong, dude. You need to go get checked out. So finally I gave in. I said, all right, I'll go get checked out. We'll see what happens. And I went into the emergency room at 11 in the morning. And by 5 in the afternoon, I was having emergency surgery to remove blood clots in my lungs and in my right leg.
It's pretty serious stuff.
Yeah. I was told that just one blood clot in your lungs, there's a 20% chance of survival. And I had multiple.
Yeah. what's going through your head? You're hearing this. You could probably feel for yourself. Your body's breaking down. You're in the hospital. What's going through your head? I mean, are you thinking, this is it for me? What are you thinking?
Well, it's funny you would think that, right? But I remember one of the doctors telling me that I forget what he called it, but there's a thing that happens mentally where you just accept the current situation you're in and you just assume that's normal. Most people do that. It's a lot of the reasons that, like, oh, I got a bad knee, it just hurts, I'm okay. You don't get it.
So from a weight perspective, you just kind of expect, you're like, this is normal.
Well, no, not just weight. It's that happens to be a phenomenon just with people.
Okay.
Like, oh, my foot hurts today. Whatever. And they just move on.
Sure. Right.
Yeah.
That's what I do anyway.
Most people
only
do.
my foot, but that's beside the point.
Right. And so they don't get checked out. They think, it'll be fine. Or it happens, for a month or two, and they're just like, yeah, I guess that's how it is now. And they just deal with it.
So when we first met, you told me the stories about the hospital room and what they called it. You talk to us about that. They stick you in a room.
Yeah, they stuck me in what's called an end of life room.
End of life.
I don't know if every hospital has what they call an end of life. Just the hospital I was in, that's what that room was called.
Like, oh, thanks for sticking me in here. I really feel like I'm going to pull through now. Thank you.
Well, thank God they did not tell me it was an end of life room.
I did not know there was such a thing. So I'm kind of fascinated by this.
Yeah. They just said they were going to give me a nice room.
Okay. All right. That's good.
I mean, and to be fair, it was a nice room. Like, it was big. It was maybe like 3 times the size of a normal hospital room. It was all to myself. There was plenty of couches and chairs for visitors.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back at it, it's because it's so spacious, because of all the equipment you might need because you're at the end of life.
Yeah.
And all the chairs for visitors because you're at the end of life. So that's why it's so spacious.
I can't even really put myself in your position. I mean, really, I'm like, I just can't help but think the thoughts that might be going through somebody's head, given that scenario.
Especially early on. So like the first week, it was a lot of like, just so much was going on. You didn't have time to process it. Right. I was getting checked on every couple of hours. I was in a lot of pain from the surgeries, from the blood thinners, just trying to make it. Then about week 2, the blood thinners had caused internal bleeding. And so I was confined to the bed. And during that time, I was in such immense pain that they gave me stronger painkillers that basically knocked me out every time I was administered them. So I was up maybe once every 6 hours for like 15 minutes, and then I would get another shot and out again. So that second week is a complete blur. Like, I really don't remember.
But apparently there's healing taking place to some degree during this process.
Yeah. So I actually went to 2 hospitals. The first hospital I was in for a month, then I was out for a month, and then I went back in for another month. And this was all during the summer 4 years ago. So basically my summer was spent in the hospital. The first hospital, they just treated the blood clots. That's all they focused on, because that was the immediate threat. They didn't really focus on my weight. They didn't focus on my heart condition, just the blood clots. Got me out of the woods there, but still there were other issues, and that's why I went back in.
So you go through this hospital stay process. Somewhere along the way, there had to be something that triggers you, and you're like, I need to do something about this. At what point? I mean, I can imagine, I'm sure you were getting egged on by the medical professionals to some degree, but what was there had to be a point in your own mind where you just go, you know what? I got to do something. I mean, did you have one of those kind of epiphany moments?
So the first month I was in, right, in the first hospital, that was a nightmare, right? Because of the internal bleeding, the end of life room, everything was bad,
Yeah.
right? And that was just horrific. And when I got out, I really thought, oh, well, I'm done with this now. I can, I can move on with my life. I can figure out how I'm going to lose this weight. And because I knew I needed to lose weight anyways, right? Like that was a thing that needed to happen.
Sure.
So that made me think, okay, I'll figure this out. At that time, I really couldn't walk. Like I couldn't walk more than a few steps just to go to the bathroom, and that was it. So that, like, I got to the point that my phone tracks my steps, right?
Yep.
And during that month out of the hospital, my goal daily was just to walk 100 steps. That's all I could do in a day.
Wow.
Yeah, it was bad. So, but when I went back in for the second 1 month stay, that was so defeating, and realizing,
Yeah.
I'm not getting better, and this is terrible. And what am I going to do? Is this really it? This can't be it. I knew that was really the switch that I needed to change something.
So how do you begin to do that?
Well, the like a lot of people, right? The doctors tell you, hey, you need to lose weight, but then that's about it. Like, it's not like there's really a program to help you. They just kind of tell you, and good
Right.
luck,
Here's one of the 400 options for you.
Yeah, go figure it out, right?
Yeah, right.
And so, what do I do? I mean, my whole life I've been battling my weight. So, like, I've tried just about everything, and I've tried, everything since a kid. And like, I would lose a little bit of weight, then I would plateau, and then I would gain it back. So that's been my life. That's most people's dieting experience, right?
Yo-yo.
And
Yep.
and so going back out there, knowing I've got 5 years left to live, potentially, unless I lose this weight, what am I going to do? So I looked at stuff that I knew that had worked for a while, like longer than most.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked at like low carb. I looked at keto. I looked at, just regular. I had a buddy of mine who lost like 200 pounds just doing regular calorie restriction.
Sure.
It worked for him, but that's not most people.
Out of curiosity, because I think a lot of people do this. When you say you were looking at these things, did you try them along the way, or just kind of research?
Yeah. No, I tried them, and they would all work for a couple months, and then they would flatten out, and then I would get frustrated, or something would happen health wise, because I still wasn't over that that initial I couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
So that was the tough part. Yeah, actually going back to the hospital, the first day, probably one of the big trigger points for me. My niece was born while I was in the hospital. She was born at a midwife center, and I couldn't be there.
Yeah.
And I remember being just really sad about that, and knowing I didn't want to live my life like that, or not be there to see her.
Yeah, that had to feel really isolated. Yeah, I would imagine you felt really isolated at that point.
Well, yeah, because everyone's over there, right? They're not with me because they're
right.
They got to be there for that, for sure. And so I just sent a text and a picture, and so but so I tried just about everything for about, I don't know, 2.5 years, 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to the point where I looked at weight loss surgery, because I figured that's got to be the last step, right?
Yeah.
And there's a couple clinics nearby me within an hour of me that do weight loss surgery, so I went to both of them. And the crazy thing is, they both openly admit, more often than not, it doesn't work.
Why is that, by the way? Did you get into that? I mean, I know a lot of people have tried this option. I'm kind of curious.
Yeah. So from what I've looked into and what I've seen at the clinics, the different clinics have different failure rates, and the ones that have the higher failure rates are the ones that don't have a program.
Shouldn't they be given success rates?
Well, they'll say they
we're
count
off
it
to a
as
bad
success
start
rates.
if that's where we're going.
Well, they count it as a success rate because they'll say, well, we're 35% successful. Okay, so 65% it doesn't work. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm learning here. All right.
Yeah. So the weight loss surgery is anywhere between, at least around here, anywhere between 15,000 and 35,000, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And most insurance does not cover it. So that's all out of pocket.
Sure.
The one clinic told me they had a success rate of 30%. The other one told me they had a success rate of 35%. So, and yeah.
So you rule that out as an option, I'm guessing at that point.
Well, no, because I'm hopeless at this point, right?
Yeah. No, I get it. Right. Sure.
It's either that or what am I going to do?
Yeah.
You know, and I have family members who have had weight loss surgery years ago, but they all gained it back. You know, I have another cousin who, when I started fasting, he had weight loss surgery right around the same time. He is now gaining weight again, and I'm not. So it's crazy. The reason I think, just, my own suspicion, is weight loss surgery doesn't tackle the fundamental root of what's going on with the weight gain.
That's a fair assessment, I would have to say.
Yeah. So because you're not hitting the root, you're just masking the symptoms.
Yeah.
So you might get some success at first, but it's not going to last. And if you look at the research for like, how long does it last long term, like 10 years out, it's almost like a 90% failure rate. And then you fundamentally forever changed your body for it to maybe work 10% of the time.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head of a lot of dudes walking around that have a lot of other problems too, because if you don't change the fundamental problem, I mean, you're putting on a Band-Aid on something that needs a lot more looking at.
Yeah. I mean, you can put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, but
yeah,
is it really helping?
Yeah. Probably going to be quite a mess, actually, if that.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? Surgery's still on the table, but
yeah. So at that point, weight loss surgery is on the table. They tell me, okay, the nutritionist, because the one I decided, like, this is the program I'm going to go with, is the 35% success rate, because I want that extra boost, right?
I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. And also they had a full program. So I figured that might help more. Right?
Sure.
So they teach you nutrition. They teach you, there was like a support group, all of that. And the nutritionist said, okay, we're going to put you on a liquid only diet. You're going to drink these shakes. And she prescribed some shakes. And she said, you're going to drink 3 to 5 of them a day. And that's it. You're going to do that for a month. And then you should lose 40 pounds. That'll show us that you're determined to do this. And then we can proceed with the surgery. So I said, okay. And walking out, only drinking liquids for 30 days seemed really daunting. Yeah.
And it seemed scary. I didn't get asked to do it. And I was feeling the weight of that as you're telling me that. I'm like, man, I do not know that I can do something like that.
But when you're so desperate, you're going to do it, And so I did it.
It's mindset, right? I mean, you got to put,
Yeah. I mean, did I have a tough time every now and then? Sure, of course. But, I wanted to live more than I wanted pizza or chicken nuggets or, So
it makes absolute sense. Yeah.
So I did it. And I walked into my appointment a month later, and I had lost 20 pounds just drinking the shakes. And she was very disappointed in me and said, you should have lost more. You should have lost at least 40 pounds. you clearly cheated on your diet.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, that's
And
fairly
I knew I had it.
inspirational.
Yeah, I knew I had it. Right. And I was just like, but I did. She's like, you did. So we're gonna go another month and you lose the other 20 and then you keep going. And I was just like, what? You know?
Yeah.
And then they had also told me that once I have the weight loss surgery, I'll be lucky if I lose 100 pounds in a year. That it just gives you a boost, but then long term, it is just traditional weight loss.
Daniel, if you walked in that office and she says to you, you know what? That's fantastic. You lost 20, and really gave you positive reinforcement. Do you feel like it would have motivated you and really threw you up over the top? Or did you keep going anyway?
Maybe, but part of what ended up happening is, so I started following Instagram and TikTok accounts for weight loss, right? People who have had weight loss surgery.
Oh, well, then, social media platforms will be happy to hear that. Yeah.
Right. Well, for inspiration for myself, like if they did it, maybe I can do it.
Right. Right.
And like maybe like sometimes they put tips up there, like,
sure.
Oh, try this, alternative for this or that, whatever. And so I was following those. And then because of the way the algorithm is, right, you start following weight loss, it starts showing you other weight loss.
Yep.
And so it started showing me intermittent fasting weight loss. And from there, what I noticed was people who did the weight loss surgery, like the first few months, they were all happy and excited and losing weight. And then less posting. And then more often than not, the accounts go dormant.
Fade away.
They fade away.
Okay.
Whereas the intermittent fasting, more often than not, consistent.
Yeah.
Consistent weight loss, consistent happiness, consistent, let's keep going. Right. And it's social media, right? It's not real life. So it's a little bit fake, but they're consistent and consistently doing it.
Yeah, but that really is a good way to look at it. You were in this, but there's always a right way and a wrong way to look at social media, right, of course. And I like the fact that you picked out the consistency and the inconsistency to figure out what's working and what's not working. Smart on your part.
Yeah. So from there, the other thing I noticed was that like the weight loss surgery, yes, it was faster than intermittent fasting in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But long term, the intermittent fasting kept it, is what it appeared. So that seemed great to me. And at that point, I had, I was 3 years into my 5-year clock. So I figured, okay, I've got a couple of months where I can try this fasting thing and just see. If it doesn't work, I'll go back to the surgery. But I'm going to try the fasting and see what happens. So not knowing what I was doing, I started it, right? And I did research, but you really don't know until you really get into it. And I lost, I think, like 35 pounds intermittent fasting in my first month. Much more than drinking shakes.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy cow, this is amazing. And because I went on a liquid diet for a month, I already knew I had the drive to do this.
Sure.
I had proven that to myself. I knew it wasn't a question of willpower. It was finding the right tactic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've just stuck with it since. And now I'm 10 months in. I'm down 165 pounds. So even more than what I last told you. And, like I said, surgery, they told me I'd be lucky for 100 pounds in a year. 10 months, I'm 165 down.
It's just such a great story,
Yeah. And I haven't fundamentally changed my body.
Yeah. So here's the cool part. So not only do you learn how to intermittent fast, there's a twist here. You come up with an idea. You're like, if we're going to do this, let's have some fun. So tell everybody how you transition from, okay, we got this intermittent fasting thing going on to a business. How do you do?
So So one thing I thought about with intermittent fasting, right? Because I was like everyone else, right? I started with 16-8, so 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of eating. And then I would progress to, a 6 hour window, 4 hour window, maybe one meal a day, sometimes a couple days without eating, just changing it up and going further and further as I continued, just because honestly, it's easy. Like once you get to the point where going days at a time really isn't that hard. And it sounds shocking, I know, but
It does to me.
yeah, yeah. The way I explain it to people is this: I may go days without eating, but my body is eating the fat that's there because that's what it's there for. That's why the body stores fat, right?
Right.
It's for when there is no food. So it just switches and burns that fat. So that's so my body is eating, I'm not, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no. Right.
Yeah. But, in researching intermittent fasting, the whole point of it is to eat more like our ancient ancestors. Way back in the day, they didn't, look at their clock and go down to 7-Eleven and pick up a rabbit, right? It was opportunity. They ran into a deer, they killed it, they ate it.
Yep.
Or they were out just wandering around, they found a berry bush, they ate some berries. They found a fruit tree, they ate some fruit.
But essentially they had to go out and wander around, which
right.
we would call exercise. Right. They were exercising. They didn't know it, but they were out exercising.
They were out exercising.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was spontaneous. It wasn't scheduled.
Right.
We do scheduled. Right. So I figured intermittent fasting could benefit from some randomization. That seemed to make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, honestly, it does get daunting and a little bit like it's hard socially when you're like, I don't eat lunch because my windows don't open then. And, it's just, it's rough.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, there's got to be a way to randomize this and have a little bit of fun with it and at least make the social aspect a little bit more. Plus, honestly, 2 months in the hospital and then everything, not being able to move for almost a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
I wanted to do social.
Sure.
I wanted to live,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why you're doing this.
Right. So, so I thought, okay, well, we always talk about rolling the dice, right? That's an expression for randomization. So I figured, okay, somebody's had to have created some sort of dice for fasting. So I Googled it. No, nobody's made them. And I couldn't believe that. Right. So then I thought, okay, that's ridiculous. How is this not made? And then I thought, well, let's see if I'm onto something. And I called the patent office and talked to them. And they said, yeah, you can completely patent this. So I did. And Fasting Dice was born.
Yeah. So this is for those of you that can't see on the podcast, they're actual dice. And tell people what's on the die there that
so I've got them right here.
And if you go to YouTube, you can see the dice. There you go.
Yeah. Or if you go to fastingdice.com, they're there. They're there too.
That's right. We'll give them that.
Yeah. Each side has got a different window. So one dice is your fasting window. The other dice is your eating window. So you roll them. So like right now I just rolled and I've got a 24-hour fast and a 4-hour eating window. So 48 hours, right? So the idea is, okay, well, I'm going to fast for 24 hours and then I'll be able to eat for 4 hours and then I'll roll again and see what else I come up with. There have been times when I go out of town, I'll roll for a few days in advance. So that way I have a schedule.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's one way to do it. There's been a couple times now where I'll roll and I'll be like, well, that's pretty good for the next few days. And I'll just stick with that for the next few days. I just make the dice work for me, right? That's the whole point. It's a tool.
Yeah, but it's an interesting tool because I think it probably helps with the mindset. I'm sure. How do you feel like the I don't want to guess at it. So how do you feel like the dice have helped you? Maybe gave you some energy. Maybe just changing it up. Whatever it is. How have they helped you sustain this?
So the biggest way I think is the randomization, because one of the reasons diets just don't work and why they plateau after a couple of months is body adaptation. Your body gets used to you doing a certain thing. right? So part of the reasons diets don't work, the science behind it is you eat calorie restricted generally, and your body metabolism will get used to that lower threshold. And so it slows down till eventually it stops because the body's freaking out, doesn't know what's coming next.
Yeah.
You know? And then so when you get frustrated and eat again, that's why it all comes right back, right? Because you've lowered your metabolism, but you've now suddenly increased your calories out of frustration, and you're already lower anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you're fighting. So that's the tough part. Whereas with this, it's constantly changing. So my body doesn't have a chance to adapt. So it fights
a little
that.
psychology going on here. I got it.
Well, yeah, and there's even like on the fasting dice, on the fasting window one, there's a cheat on there. So randomly, you could get yourself a cheat meal. And that kind of makes it fun too. Like, hey,
Yeah.
can I have something kind of cool today?
Sweet.
Yeah. And because of that, it's like a little reward that, it's spontaneous
Yeah.
reward, and you can keep going. I do tell people, if you roll 2 cheats in a row, maybe go to a casino. But
No, listen, this is awesome because I think there is a seriousness, right, that comes with dieting.
Oh yeah,
if you will, if we want to use that. And I like the ingenuity behind this because you're rolling a dice. There is some bit of randomness to it, but there's also structure and a methodology behind it all at the same time. And let's face it, the reason people really quit diets, they just get bored with it and sick with it. And at least I would. I've actually never gone on a diet personally, but
yeah. Well, and honestly, like, how do apps become addicting, right? They're gamified. So if you're gamifying your diet, your weight loss strategy, the idea is you'll stick to it better as well.
Yeah. No, I think it's brilliant. So Daniel, as we wrap up today, how can people find you? How can they find this dice and check it out and consider fasting as an option?
Yeah. So if you go to fastingdice.com, you'll see the dice right there. All my social media is linked there. There's even a contact page where you can contact me. There's a resources tab where I post videos about fasting and different techniques and just some of the latest science behind it. And that's all up there. There's also my podcast interviews where I've talked about this. So yeah, it's all right there for you. And I just want to help people out.
Yeah. Before we leave today, because I didn't ask this question, how are you feeling? Do you feel, how does it feel to have lost all this weight? How are you feeling? How's your health? You seem very even keel. You seem like you're just ready to take on the world. I got to be honest. So how are you feeling?
I feel fantastic, but more than that, the doctors have seen a significant increase in my health. To give you an idea, it's been 4 years, right, since everything, and I've been on medications, and there's been improvement through the medications for sure. But this last year, when I went to saw my cardiologist and my hematologist, both of them, there was significant increases in my abilities and my function. When I first got out of the hospital, my EF factor, which is how they measure how your heart functions, was much higher than what it was at the hospital. Average person is right around 70 points. Nobody's at 100. Like, it's just, the heart just is not optimized at 100. Olympic athletes tend to be at about 85. When I was coming out of the hospital, I was in the 40s, like 40 to 44, somewhere in there, they estimate. Last EF, I was in the 70s. So
now, by the way, when you tell your doctors what you've been doing, what are they like, blown away? Or are they like, yeah, well, sure, yeah, that makes sense? Or what are they? What's their reaction?
One, they're just amazed that it's not normal for cardiac patients to be able to lose weight so easily, and I'm doing right. Plus, I was one of the worst that they had as far as condition. My cardiologist was so surprised by me. He asked me to speak to other cardiologists just recently and tell them what I'm
Wow.
doing so that they can help other patients.
Well, that in and of itself is pretty incredible. But I love the fact, I love the fact that there are so many different options available for people to attain good health. In other words, there's not a one size fits all. And I think
Yeah.
you're absolutely living proof of that. That, you know, if you want to do something like this, that there's options available, and, you know, for everybody.
Right.
Awesome. Well, Daniel, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. It's been a pleasure hearing your story. We are so thankful that you're doing well. And we're going to put his information in the show notes. So if you're considering fasting as an option, you know, this dice might be something that you want to check out. So, Daniel, thanks again for being on the show. We sure appreciated having you on the True Man podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.